Hey everyone, and welcome to the Perfect Bite podcast, your fusion of food and entrepreneurship. You'll hear stories from chefs, restaurateurs, CPG brands, and more from the food and bev industry. All of them are at different points in their journeys, talking about their experiences and how they've cooked up something new. Let's dig in. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Perfect Bite podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Perkins. On this show, we obviously talk a lot about food and how delicious it is, how much of an impact it makes on us. But knowing your food is safe and properly taken care of, that's priceless. Today's guest is behind an innovation keeping the back of the house running smoothly and your meals as fresh as they can be. Please welcome ConnectedFresh CEO and co-founder, Jake Simon. Hi, Jake.
Hey there. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so happy to have you here. How is beautiful Los Angeles right now?
It's good. It's extremely windy, but that's weather in LA. That's what makes the news is a little bit of wind or a little bit of rain. So we're doing okay in the grand scheme.
I'm glad. And things are doing better after the fires?
Yeah, certainly. I wasn't immediately in danger myself, but certainly I have a number of friends who were heavily impacted. But actually, one of the really cool things that's come out of it is just how the communities come back together. There are some events coming up around restaurants too, where it's people just trying to support restaurants and getting people out there and having specific dinners on interesting topics, but framing it around food. So it's turned back to restaurants, as a lot of things do when we talk about community and conversation. Overall, we're making our way back.
I'm glad to hear that. And again, it takes a while to come back from tragedy. But like you said, folks come together, and it's even more amazing when we do it over food.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's take it back a little bit here. I always love to start at the beginning. Talk to us about when you first fell in love with food. Did you have any favorite foods as a kid? What was that like in your house growing up?
Yeah, a lot of home cook kind of stuff. So it wasn't so much about going out to eat for everything. It was more about making things and spending a lot of time in the afternoon and the evenings co-creating together a little bit. But really, my mother is an excellent chef, right? So it's been a lot of really good food and maybe taking advantage of that fact in terms of relying on that. But the through line, I think, from childhood to now has always just been pizza. So pizza is always a favorite. And obviously, some pizza can be blank slate where you can make many different types and could taste many different ways. But I moved to New York a couple of years ago, was there for a while. And maybe that solidified it in my mind. But pizza seems to be the through line that keeps us going.
Pizza is the through line that keeps all of us going. Agreed, again, as a longtime Chicagoan myself. And I do like a New York slice. What is your favorite?
It is a New York slice. To be honest, I'm in LA now, but probably have like 3 or 4 of my favorite pizza places, and 2 of them are New York slice places. That actually, I mean, it's not the same as being in New York, but hey, if I can get anywhere close, it's pretty good. And one of them's a dangerous 5 or 6 blocks away. That's a good one to keep relying on.
100%. And again, if you miss it, it's just a plane ride away.
Yeah.
Calling you.
Yeah. Or during the pandemic, what we did was we used Gold Belly for someone's birthday and actually had Joe's Pizza sent over here for a little bit, which is a lot, but it was really a cool time to be able to bring some New York back, some normalcy into it.
It doesn't matter what time or what we're going through. It's always the through line, whether it's pizza or something else.
Yep, exactly. And this might guide our conversation, but your point about that being what we revolve ourselves around, it's also, if you have a bad experience with it, that really, really sticks with you. For all the good that food can bring, sometimes these things and the topic of food safety, food quality, things like that, sometimes it goes into the back burner and assuming that things are working the way they should. But there's a lot of work that goes into making sure it is safe and people don't get sick. I myself was sick by food about 2 months ago, and it was dreadful. And I'm never going to be able to disassociate that place from that item or from being sick. So yeah, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah. And like you said too, I've had those moments, and oh my gosh, I had a moment with ropa vieja, which is just really sad because I love Cuban food and it's going to take a while.
Yeah.
But I'm going to push forward. We'll get back there one day.
Absolutely. Godspeed.
I actually love that you brought us back there, and I'm excited for everyone to hear just how passionate you are about the space we're going to talk about today. let's talk about how you got there. So you grew up in California, correct?
Yep, I was in California, went to USC, so stayed in California. And
Right
then
on.
after started working at Deloitte, where I was found myself into their smart sensors, Internet of Things practice, but it was more on the industrial side of things. So everything from Caterpillar to Ford's F-150 line, but it was all in the name of predictive maintenance. How can we prevent issues from occurring,
Mm.
looking at all the data and be able to identify issues and risks before they actually become a problem for the operation? So are there early warning signals that can allow you to take care of something before it goes wrong and throws chaos? So had a friend that had a produce shop in St. Louis, and they were just losing tens of thousands of dollars of tomatoes just because they had aging equipment and they just didn't know that something was going wrong. It's like a lot of these cases, you can fix it if you know about it, or you can at least respond to it, or you can diminish your loss, right?
Mhm.
But if you don't know about it, sometimes you're sitting at home and you could be doing something about it. So ultimately, we started creating just like a, hey, how can I see this data from afar kind of thing? Then started throwing alerts, notifications, advanced rules, analytics on it, right? Started solving for more and more different types of use cases, and not just temperature for a cooler, but much more advanced kind of stuff across the spectrum.
Yeah, let's get into that a little bit further. Are you someone who's always loved analytics? You're talking about predictive analytics, the Internet of Things, kind of layman's terms here for folks, is combining tech and hardware in a
Mhm.
sense, right?
Yeah, you can think of the internet as being the connectivity and the things as being literally like things in the world, right? Whether it's a refrigerator or any sort of widget, right?
A physical good.
A physical thing.
Excellent. So you went from working with cars and large car manufacturers to hearing a friend's problem. And I always love when a business starts that way, when you see an explicit problem and you're thinking, hey, I think I might know a solution for this, or I have an idea of what the solution could be. How can we build upon it? What was that moment that you went from being a guy at Deloitte to saying, I want to do something entrepreneurial? Why Connected Fresh? Why that moment?
Yeah, well, there's a lot to unpack there. But I've always
We've
been kind
got
of
time.
entrepreneurial in general, right? So being able to create things and run things, it really was, I was interviewing the person who happened to work for Deloitte. And I was telling him that what I really wanted to do after college was I wanted to be able to use technology to make things more efficient or effective. And they've known that it's kind of through line and everything that I've been doing. But the guy was like, that's what we do, right? And I was like, no, I don't. So there was a fun conversation, right? But at the end of it, it's basically like, how can I identify issues and fix them? And that's everything from, like, for my own personal benefit, it's smart home automation of lighting and switches and things turning on and being more effective or efficient. But in the real world, there's so much you can do with it. And I've always been a fan of the kind of open source model, if you will, of
Mhm.
you don't have to recreate everything to have the thing work. Are there bases that you can build upon? Like, we don't manufacture sensors, we don't design sensors, we just buy off the shelf sensors. This is what Deloitte really instilled. And from a car manufacturer to a restaurant is not necessarily a direct line other than you driving there, right? But the ability to architect something as if it was for a major enterprise, and you have to have the scalability to it and things that allow for change management and people to use it extremely easily, because something can be the best app in the world, but if people don't use it and they just shelve it because they're confused, it didn't do anything, right? So it's a lot of, there's a lot that goes into making a fantastic product, especially something that's automated or looks at efficiency gains. And that's a lot of what we learned at Deloitte. And a lot of my team comes from Deloitte. Like, we're all working together on these projects together. I wasn't in the food space before, right? But several people on my team were. And so they came with that perspective as well as just trying to apply. But we're looking around and we're saying, you don't have to hire Deloitte to be able to get some of these types of benefits. And you can do it on a repeatable model that's a turnkey sort of solution where you're able to jump in. It's not going to cost a whole lot to do it. And there are just so many, like tens of thousands of dollars at a time, of people saving real money because they were able to avert something that they just didn't even know was going on. So it's a lot for the taking. And if you do it in a way that properly scales and is flexible and works into the future and doesn't rely on proprietary stuff all the time, from our perspective, everyone wins.
Yeah. I love how you said you don't always have to recreate everything. for it to work really well, you can just put your own spin on it. So that applies to technology. That applies to food, even. It applies to a dish. You can take something that's already there that's amazing, and you can add your own seasoning to it, which is
Yeah,
essentially,
100%.
again, a dumbed down version of the amazing things you just said. And
Let's carry that through, right? It's basically a pizza layer, right? And it's like pizza dough, right? That's the base of it. And
yes, it
pizza
is.
dough is not just, one size fits all. People make incredible dough and it's different. But are you recreating every single piece of that pie? Or are you able to focus on if they put it on there because that's their added benefit? And I know this is a little loose, right? But building on top of things isn't necessarily a bad thing. If I went and recreated everything from scratch to do ConnectedFresh, it would be questionably sustainable and the operator would have very limited options because I would have to go to market with specific sensors and all this kind of stuff. And it would have cost us a whole lot more to build it. And in turn, it would have cost the operator a whole lot more to have it. Right. So yeah, just such a huge fan of taking things that are already there and obviously respectfully and copyright, paying attention to that kind of stuff, building on top of other things to be able to give people what they need.
Well, one, anytime that we can keep making a pizza metaphor, it's going to make me want to fire up the uni very soon here. I love my uni.
Yeah, my
Mm.
parents have one, and I think it's good that I don't have one. They're close enough to go make a pizza, but at the same time, I don't know if I need that much pizza in my life.
You might change your mind. So, talk to us about the early days of Connected Fresh. You see the problem, you've got an existing product, which in your case is sensors, and you're recognizing that it can be utilized in kitchens and the back of the house in restaurants. So, talk to us about the different uses that you first started off with
Mhm.
and the results that you were seeing. Who were some of these first customers? What were their reactions? And what made you guys say, okay, I think we're onto something here?
Yeah. Well, please interrupt me because there are a lot of questions in there. We can talk about each one of these for at length, but essentially just one point of clarification. The sensors themselves, we weren't using something specific at Deloitte and then we're
Mhm.
like, hey, we can apply this somewhere else. Really, we're just talking about real-time data. At the end of the day, any one of these sensors, they fit in the palm of your hand, but they are many different types of sensors that work around a centralized technology, right? And so it was that kind of approach to how can I get this real time data there? Because at the end of the day, sensors, whether it's home sensors or in the industrial space or the commercial space, right? They're not smart sensors, they're just digital sensors, right? And then it's what do you do with that data to actually turn it into an insight or something actionable? Or you combine sensor data together to then come up with something that you otherwise wouldn't be able to. So for us, what that turned into was we identified LoRaWAN about 6, 7 years ago. LoRaWAN stands for long range wide area network, right? All you
Uh-huh.
really need to know about is a super long distance, very low power radio frequency technology. And what it means is to get technical, it's taking that encrypted data and it's creating the standard for that. So from a home perspective, or just in general, when we talk about Wi-Fi connected devices, there's always that thing that people are talking about where it's like, well, be careful what you put on your network, right? You got to be
Right.
careful from a security standpoint, all that kind of stuff, right? With this, the devices are not actually touching the network at all. They're connecting to a centralized hub, a gateway. And for restaurants or any business that doesn't even want that to touch their network end to end, that gateway can just be on cellular. So it never touches anything. Part of the reason is the security element of it, where we can pull many different types of sensors from different vendors, but it's not like connecting a random device to your network, which is
Okay.
legitimately, can be dangerous. The other part of it is just battery life, right? So any radio frequency technology is going to need to be powered. So LoRaWAN it's not Wi-Fi, it's not Bluetooth, it's another thing, right? But the way that it works is it's made for long distance, low power, and by sending these teeny tiny little packets of data instead of larger things. So line of sight without anything interrupting it, it can go 5 or 6 miles with that packet of data. Any radio frequency's worst enemy is metal. And we're basically a lot of times putting these in a metal cage, a refrigerator, right?
Yeah.
So it diminishes it a little bit, but we're still able to get a connection much, much stronger than Wi-Fi or cellular or things like that. As any restaurateur knows, going into a walk-in cooler, you might look at your phone, you have no service at all. It can really stop things, but the signal is able to get out of it. But the thing that we love the most about it is the battery life, right? We're talking 5 to 10 years on a single battery charge. And again, I'm not pushing anything that like I'm creating. This is all off the shelf available stuff, right? But because it lasts so long, it allows us to pre-configure it. So we send someone a sensor, like a temperature sensor, for example. It's going
Sure.
to be pre-labeled. You literally have to turn it on. You put it in the cooler and that's it, right? Because the network already knows that sensor because we've already put it on the network, and it's going to last 5 or 10 years. And then you just have to replace the battery, right? You don't have to keep buying new equipment or upgrading, because when you have a model where someone is selling you the hardware or the hardware and the software together,
Mhm.
and it's their proprietary stuff, they want ways that can become recurring or they can get the most out of it. It turns into a bit of a conflict of interest from my perspective. And so we really, really enjoyed being able to utilize this technology and keep growing in many different types of sensors while still remaining open on these frameworks. So lastly, just to really answer your question, energy consumption, doors, leaks, feedback buttons, water flow, water quality, fill levels. A thing like a door sensor is just, that's a digital sensor,
Yeah.
it's not a smart sensor, right? So you can use that same door sensor to understand, can you pay all this money for pest control services and someone just props open the back door? Can you
Uh,
identify how often that's done so that you can focus your training resources on people who are actually maybe not following your SOPs? Or is that walk-in cooler having issues with the latch or with the door seal and it's just bouncing back open when people close it? That happens so often, and many times people just don't know. And then you
wow.
can use the same exact sensor for put it on the bathroom door, and instead of cleaning it on arbitrary schedules after it opened and closed a certain amount of times, then go trigger something to clean it, right? So there are so many different types of use cases and uses with these sensors, but overall, it's the flexibility and adaptability of doing it around the standard and architecting something that allows you to remain flexible. That really the core of making this in our minds, the best, most flexible long-term solution for operators.
Yeah. I also like that one, a 5 to 10-year-old battery. What's Apple doing? I need that in my AirTag. Like,
I mean,
how am I supposed
if
to keep track of my luggage?
here's the thing, if you are okay with, instead of everything that your iPhone does for you, instead of that, it just sends a temperature value, not a few times a day, a few times an hour, then it can last a really long time. But because we have so many processing things, and there's so much that goes into any given program today, that there's a lot of power requirements for that. And batteries are only getting more efficient. When we started this, it was 3 to 5 years for one of these devices. Now they quote 5 to 10 years, and now they're quoting more than 10 years. And most of the variability between 5 and 10 is if you take if we're still talking, temperature is just the easiest to keep coming back to. But if you put a temperature sensor into a cooler, the longevity of that battery is going to be less than if it was at ambient temperature. And if you have it in a freezer, it's going to be even less, but you're still talking years. Part of the problem here is that you're taking so many like manual things within the restaurant environment. Someone going around
Mm,
taking these temperature logs X amount of times per day, right? And writing them down on a piece of paper, which we can get into is not a helpful process at all. But when they do that, you're taking someone's role that they don't even want to be doing themselves and you're digitizing it, you're automating
yeah.
that process. But where I've seen so many things fail around this area, or just call it Internet of Things in general, is if you have the wrong system, process, sensors, technology, and this kind of stuff, right? You've now taken something that your entry level person is taking the logs for. You've taken it off their plate, which does help you in some ways, but then the batteries only last a couple of months tops.
Mm,
And now you've made it the manager's job to be remembering to change it and having to change it and all this stuff. So you've basically taken something that was one of your team members' job, and to save them time, you've given something to someone that already is overextended, right? So there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on. So you got to make sure that if you're actually digitizing something or fully automating it, it doesn't have these unintended consequences down the line.
So you said so much there about just restaurant operations, right? With just a simple sensor and your software that helps detect issues, say with temperature changes, that can also be quite dangerous for food safety, as well as water quality, things along those lines. You're saving so much money for these restaurants that already have incredibly low margins. When you have a long lasting battery and a product like yours, they don't have to keep purchasing it over and over again, which is helpful. And you saved time for the person who I don't think that I would have known until we've had this conversation that someone was walking around every day checking the temperature of a refrigerator or freezer just to
Yeah.
make sure that your food is okay. So you now gave that person as well who would have had that task the opportunity to grow and really excel in the kitchen in different ways. So
Yep.
kudos to ConnectedFresh. This is so cool. I'm learning a lot already. I bet a lot of folks on here are too. So when you were first bringing this around to folks and you were getting your first customers, how did you build those relationships with restaurants and with restaurateurs? It's a lot of trust in this industry and with something as sensitive as this.
Yeah. To be honest, really begrudgingly, it has been incredibly difficult to push this out. So at the very start of it, right? Technically on paper, we're founded in 2019. We were
Mhm.
basically ready with a proof of concept, something that was deployable in February of 2020. So we all know
Oh,
how that went for the restaurant industry right after that, right? So being able to get people to purchase something like this was kind of a non-starter. We at the time still had our day jobs. So we kept our day jobs and we're working on this in our spare time, kept that going. So we were doing all right during that time. But it was, like you said, it is built on trust. A lot of it has to do with pilots. I am more than happy to prove it to you, right? I want to prove it to you. I want you to see this value. We are not just trying to give people sensors so that you have a connected restaurant, you have all this data. That's not helpful to anyone, right? So some organizations that have a very robust data analytics department, sure, that's an input to them and they can do something with that. But for most people, more data to sift through is not a savings to their time. You're adding to it. So it's really focused on like, what is the actual challenge that you're experiencing and what solution can. So we take that kind of one by one. If someone's biggest thing is temperature, which it often is to start at least, we can solve for that. But then you have something, you have a platform that allows you to later down the line, if you want to do energy or you want to combine energy with temperature to figure out if your walk-in's going to go down, right? All this kind of stuff can just be added on because you're just adding a sensor. You already have that hub in place. Getting customers at the very beginning, though, and to now, right? It's been a lot of education. The restaurant industry overall is definitely a bit behind on technology. But what we
sure.
were seeing from the industrial side, we knew was coming to restaurants as soon as people can make it financially viable and cheap enough for someone who's working on margins to be able to afford. And so it was extremely difficult because, I mean, even just take temperature, right? Someone has been going for the last, call it 50 years. Someone has been going in, taking the temperature, writing down on a piece of paper and logging it, or that's the best practice. Why change now?
Mhm.
Right? Most of the people that we signed on with very early, the answer to that was because I just lost a cooler. I just paid tens of thousands of dollars plus the time to fix that issue. Plus, I wasn't able to serve stuff to customers. I'm not just saying tens of thousands of dollars willy nilly. These are proven use cases, right? It's things as simple as my power went out and I didn't even know my power went out, but you guys told me my power went out. I was able to go there and start moving stuff before it went to the danger zone, right? So at the very beginning and through the first few years, it was a lot of education of what is this? How can it work? Why you? And how our vision of being more open and us not manufacturing the sensors using off the shelf components. And then we do our analytics and the data and all the hierarchy and all this kind of role based access notifications. It astounds me how many applications that say they do something having to do with sensors can't even send a notification or don't email, text message, automated phone calls, Slack, Teams, etc. Like that should be the
Yeah.
base. But the way that we work is we have been so focused on bringing down these walled gardens of data in this industry of you're with my app, therefore you can only access your data in my app, right? Or I'm going to charge you to be able to push it somewhere else. Or that other where I push it is they're going to have to build this middleware or build a way to be able to take it in and do something with it. It doesn't have to be that difficult. The way that we do it is give me an endpoint and tell me what format to send the message in, and I'll send it exactly in the format that you need so you don't have to recreate something. And those types of principles, it took a really, really long time for people to understand why those were important. But we're hearing now at conferences, people are like, I will not onboard a vendor that doesn't allow me to do this. And we've been doing a lot of work with the Restaurant Technology Network around this and data standards and things like that. It's been really rewarding, but it's definitely taken a lot longer than we initially thought. And some people, to be honest, had to learn their lessons the hard way. Because there's a hardware component to this, there's an investment of physical goods, right? And so I feel for those people. The good news is that all this stuff is still fairly low cost. So being able to get into it is not difficult. Being able to reset and do it the right way is not too difficult. But the biggest thing out of everything is that we've just been so focused on education. If I can help people with knowing what types of questions to ask when they go into a discussion, with someone about, call it sensors for lack of a better term, maybe that comes back to me and maybe they want to work with us. Cool, great. But like if they don't, at least they know, right? And we get great feedback from those conversations anyway. So it's always a win-win. So long-winded answer, but it's been a lot of education. It's definitely taken a lot to get to this point. Temperature monitoring is something that people are relatively pretty familiar with at this point, but now it's energy and doors and leaks and fill levels and all of this kind of stuff that you can do. But if you've already invested into a program just to do this one thing, now you're going to need another app and another application to do the next thing, right? And then the next thing. So we're trying to change that part of it.
You said a whole lot right there. And you're not the first guest on this show when it comes to restaurant tech and food tech who just talks about how disjointed it all is. Just from the customer side of things, think of how many reservation platforms and delivery platforms and rewards and all these things that don't connect. The same thing's happening on the restaurant side of things. And so I love that you've offered something that's better, cheaper, more holistic as well. So that person can say again, well, I was told to go with this one platform and then I'm using this whole other thing for, invoice devicing and things like that. And you're bringing it all together in one spot. So importantly as well is that, yes, you're saving time, you're saving money, big time, especially for folks who, like we talk about, restaurant industry is so incredible, but people aren't usually getting rich off of it. Environmentally as well, you're also helping from a food waste perspective. Do you think you'll end up measuring that in the future in terms of, say, like pounds of food saved or CO2 emitted, reduced because of how you were able to let them know a problem's coming?
Yeah. In short, yes. That's the beauty of this, right? Is that you don't need to know as an operator what you're going to need in the next 3 to 5 years. But we also don't need to know what everything is going to be forever, right? We're able to keep bringing things in as they come out. When it comes to the food waste subject, that was actually one of the things that we initially started with. Those tomatoes that were being lost in that cooler, there's a financial component to it for sure. But the food waste element of it was something that we were really passionate about. However, getting someone to buy a product because it saves food waste is not really what's going to have them sign on the dotted line and be able to jump in. So the reality is that we have to find other things that are going to get them their ROI justifiably. So being able to get them those things that are going to get them what they need while also being able to save things like food waste. We were actually awarded last year a grant from Refed, who's a huge proponent of food waste reduction, and Toast.org was one of the funders of the grant. And what this was focused on was using small fill level sensors. And we do fully automated cool down logs and things that can really drive at not only saving food from being wasted, but measuring it as well. So weight scales and things like that, where like you have this compost in, but like how much is it actually being filled and at what rate? There are so many different use cases for it. But at the end of it, it's, are you able to prevent something from being wasted? You can't really genuinely measure that. I mean, energy consumption is a really good example of this.
That's
how
great.
how can you reduce your energy spend if you don't even know what it is, right? And you might get that dollar amount from the utility company at the end of each month, how much uses, how much it costs, right? But you don't know how much that refrigerator did. You don't know if it's different than it was last month or this time last year or whatever it is, right? So there's a lot of things having to do with savings, but they have to have that baseline. And so having that baseline is step one. Being able to actually save it is part two. But when you take something like cool down logs, so for anyone that's not as familiar with it, right, you have chicken that you batch cook and then you're putting into the refrigerator, and it needs to go from its cooking temperature to 70 degrees within 2 hours and 41 degrees within 4 hours after that, for a total of 6 hours, right? And so today, people have to go in and make sure that it's getting down to the right level by the right time. If it reaches checkpoint 1 or checkpoint 2, but hasn't cooled to the right temperature, you're supposed to throw it away. So by that time, it's too late. And you have to, that's food waste. It's also time preparation. Who knows if you can actually serve the customer because you have to start cooking and start that 6 hours from scratch, right? The amount that goes into that, and don't forget, people aren't usually just cooling one thing at a time, right? You have things that are staggered, things that go from shift to shift, things that are cooling overnight. So it starts becoming this disaster. But if you're able to identify that it's not going to cool by the right time, and you're able to intervene before it gets to that point, you can bring it back up to heat and start the process over again. Or you can rapidly cool it with like an ice bath or something like that to bring it down temperature even faster. And then you can keep it, you can serve it. And there's a lot of loss happening with these types
Mhm.
of things, and let alone the food safety concerns and things like that, right? But being able to solve this, but not just digitizing that process of someone having to go in a bunch of times, but taking care of it and automating it. So for us, that's equivalent to you take a probe, you put it into the chicken or whatever it's cooling, right? And you just walk away. The system knows that something is starting. It knows all the parameters to do. It knows what food it is, and it just starts. And so it's those types of things where we're never going to get to a point of food waste becoming something where people will actually pay for unless we tackle the food safety and the operations side of it from a dollar perspective to be able to support the end goal of reducing food waste or sustainability goals and things like that. So it's always been a huge part of us and something I'm clearly very passionate about, but it has to play into the larger landscape. And for us, that plays into our strength of being able to be so flexible. But really, we're always just looking for more ways to do some of those exact types of things.
And I love that you shared that in that sense too, right? Of, okay, it might not be the biggest selling point to get someone on board, but it's such a benefit overall. And I think it's really cool from a restaurant customer perspective that I know a lot of food isn't going to waste. I know that the food is also safe and delicious and fresh because of these innovations. So that's what I want to keep coming back to, as well as some listeners might be super technical. Some listeners might be really familiar with back of house with restaurants, but some might be like me. My one back of house job ever was as a phone girl at my local pizzeria growing up. And again, the only thing I did was like pick some basil off of a stem every now and then when I wasn't answering the phone. But I imagine that someone who is handling the food a lot more can really see the benefit here. And I'm going to make a good dad joke. The meese is no longer a mess, thanks to ConnectedFresh.
Exactly. Always a fan of a good dad joke. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where there's so many benefits to it, but we haven't even talked about the ability to see all this stuff in real time when you're not even at the restaurant, right? It's like
Right.
these teams of food safety people and brand standards and compliance that make up these organizations and keep them out of the news for outbreak related reasons or having issues with food safety. And there's regulatory fines and all that kind of stuff, right? They're the ones who really run the show and make sure that things are good. But these people, to be able to do their jobs effectively, they need this type of information and indicators that can bring information to you. Like we started working with Luna Grill last year, right? And
Hmm.
they're fast casual Mediterranean, really good stuff. They had a 15% pass rate on their third party auditing for their cool down logs, right? And so basically that meant that someone wasn't filling in the right form at the right time or something was failing or whatever it was. Within a quarter, we had that at 98%.
Wow.
And so something going from 15% to 98% is astounding and more than they even expected, to be quite honest. But imagine how much that takes off that food safety person's plate to be able to focus on other things and focus on building up other processes and using their time in a more productive way while also making sure that not only they are responsible for it, they know they have all the information in real time, and every manager at every location receives a report and the stores get a phone call if something goes wrong. Like they have the systems in place that are working for them instead of these ever ballooning roles and responsibilities that come with this stuff. Having these types of benefits that span across roles, departments, use cases, using one sensor for multiple insights and sending that data to other platforms. If there's a corrective action for a food safety issue that happened, don't generate a notification, go send it to someone, and they have to go and input it into another platform and go do it. It's like, just go send it to that platform. So like partnerships are a huge element for us. We're not going to go recreate that compliance management system. We're not going to go recreate a facilities management system. Just go send that information to them. It makes their product better. It gives you a better use of their product. And it all happens without someone having to go create a work order ticket because the refrigerator is down. It's already in there and someone can already start acting on it. So there's just so many benefits all around and it's all coming, right? It's all making huge differences. People are starting to hear about it more, which is definitely helping. But knowing what types of things you need to be asking. Is ConnectedFresh the best solution for everyone? Probably not, right? But for most people, yeah, like this is the solution that's going to scale as you do. But making sure that people have the knowledge, because if you haven't played around in this domain before, it's like, how could you even know what things to be asking about? But yeah, I mean, my future focus on this industry is very positive. People, once they understand it, once they see it working, they're like, yes, we get it. And then it starts becoming a mandate.
That's so wonderful. And so your type of customer, they're not typically like a single mom and pop shop, right? You said QSR company, restaurants. So you're thinking multiple locations and chains, the type of folks who do have, say, someone who's in food safety and regulation on their team. So I want to ask a question around that, just based on the current environment. So obviously, there's a lot happening in the world right now. And a lot of that is really affecting food and bev, agriculture, the supply chain, and things along those lines. Are there any regulations or ordinances that you've been hearing about or that you're expecting that you guys are preparing for, that you're working through with your customers?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it has to do with digitization of records
Mm,
overall. So like FSMA
okay.
204 is a good example where it's talking about being able to have that chain of custody records for temperature across the supply chain. This is mostly focused on the transportation side. That's where it's focused first in terms of dates where it's instilled, but it's going to keep
Mm,
going down to restaurants and brick and mortar themselves of having to collect this stuff. Regulation is going to lag a little bit behind this because you still have, for example, like some health departments require you to take temperature logs. Some say it's a best practice. But when they walk
mm,
in and they're doing a surprise inspection, they're checking the temperature. So if you're not ready for that, then yeah, you had that coming. But as far as keeping the logs, there's kind of two sides to it. One is some government entities around this side of making sure that the health and safety code is right. It's a bit outdated in some ways, right? So they might still require a log, or they might be like, what is this? I don't understand what this is, right? But when they start figuring it out and they're bringing it into their processes to say, this is a best practice, I think it's going to make a huge difference. Like anecdotally, we've had so many people, so many customers come to us saying that the health inspector walked in, did their inspection, and as soon as they saw that they were using sensors, it just totally shifted the mood of the
oh,
conversation in a very positive way because they're
good.
like, you're showing that you're being proactive,
Hmm.
right? And yeah, that's helping you make sure that you stay compliant, sure. But just the ability to show that you are being ahead of the game, that you're thinking about these things, that you're focused on food safety. And we just want to be able to give people the right data at the right time so the right person can act on something that needs to be acted upon. As more people know about this technology and more examples of it are being in play, it's helping people immensely. But you're also starting to have the conversations around why isn't this the norm?
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to get a little bit more heartfelt here for a second. We have talked about data and analytics and what's so important for a business. And you have so much passion about this, which is amazing. I want to come back to what about Connected Fresh really brings that sense of connectivity, that solution? How does it come back to the love that you see in food and hospitality and that sense of caring that we all know?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the difference between being stressed and being happy. It's if someone is responding to an issue that's happening on the floor and they work for a restaurant, that's a stressful situation versus they're out in front of the customer serving them with a smile on their face, right? That person in doing that job of taking those temperatures, it's like, can that person enjoy their job a little bit more by having something that they don't really want to be doing and isn't really helpful and it's just kind of menial? Can they have that taken care of? And realistically, our guests coming in knowing that there are all these food safety processes happening in the background, not necessary. Like people, it's the expectation that something is safe, not the anomaly. But by instilling this culture of being proactive instead of reactive to things, we're bringing together, and I don't want to say it's our complete doing, but at least further enabling the restaurant industry to have things working for them instead of dealing with issues. We serve C stores and grocery and distribution and things like that. But if you look at restaurants, whether it's true or not, there's a connotation of chaos.
Sure.
and chaos because you're a really busy restaurant. And for anyone that's watched The Bear, right? That's chaos all the time, but it's chaos in cooking the food, right? And there's passion behind it and things like that. But like the moments where is it controlled chaos? Is the walk-in down and now they can't serve something? And it really just comes back to, are people being proactive about things? Can you focus on the things that you need to focus on instead of worrying about the things that it's basically the definition of anxiety, right? It's worrying about something that might happen, right? And if we can take care of doing that and bring people way more about the food and the guest experience and positioning people so that they can be doing more productive things to run that restaurant. I mean, that's in our DNA of what we want to be solving for. So everything has to point back to.
I think your answer is really that part of your mission is you take care of people who take care of people. You provide a sense of hospitality through the Internet of Things, and we can thank our sensor friends all for it so that we can all enjoy the purpose of going to our favorite spots to eat, which is connecting with each other over an amazing meal
Yeah, exactly. Without the chaos.
with a little less chaos. Some people
A
really
little less chaos. A little chaos is good. That's what keeps things interesting and also fun at times. But again, our goal isn't, we're not giving people a dashboard to stare at all day. We're telling people when they need to pay attention to something. So go focus on the things that you actually need to be focusing on to run the restaurant, cook the food, and serve the customer. And let us tell you when you need to pay attention to something bigger.
love it. So you're going to be at the big National Restaurant Association show here in May coming up. So again, anyone who's been in the industry or tangentially to it, this is huge. It's always in Chicago. I used to live in the neighborhood it happened in, so we were well aware. So what are you going to be bringing to the show, and what can attendees expect from Connected Fresh? How should they find you? Anything exciting that you're going to have on site there?
Yeah, well, first of all, booth 6072, I believe is correct. We'll have a full booth with a full setup. And really, it's the opportunity for people to actually see the physical nature of the sensors, right? So it's hard to sometimes conceptualize what are you talking about when you say sensors, and actually being able to look at it and see the size factor and the fact that it fits in the palm of your hands and works 10 years. That's something that's very powerful to be able to see and have a discussion with us of what the challenges are. Again, it's not here's 5 things that we do, which one do you want? It's no, what are your challenges? Understanding it properly so that you can actually provide the right thing, right? But we'll have displays of things like automated cool down logs, because that's quite unique, and some water related things for the water purification, but also for the machines, right? You can imagine like an espresso maker, you spend $30,000 on your new espresso maker, but you're putting hard water into it, right? That's destroying the machine. There's a lot of things that we'll be showing and just having conversations with people. It's such a great show. It's wildly massive. You are correct in that. And it's actually gotten bigger this year. There's a whole nother hall that they opened as an extension to the one that we're at. But we're just going to be looking forward to meeting a lot of people that we already know, but certainly a lot of people that pass and are interested in just learning more. Again, going back to the education piece, we just want people to know what is out there and what to look for.
Well, have an amazing time. Don't get lost in McCormick, and I'll be sure to send you my old neighborhood Rex for the South Loop.
Yeah, it's one of those conferences that there's food everywhere, which can be good and bad. But my rule generally for myself is I can't go get a Chicago dog until at least noon, because they're giving them out in the mornings, and that doesn't feel like a breakfast to me.
Listen, we have rules about ketchup for Chicago dogs, but we don't have rules about time. So when you're...
That's true.
what happens at the NRA show stays at the NRA show.
I will keep that in mind.
One last question before we get to the world's best and hardest question here. What's some advice that you'd have for anyone wanting to start their own thing, whether it's within the technology side of things, within the food side of things? What would you want to know when you were first starting off?
I think that what is very difficult is if you're getting into an industry that you're not already in, that's extremely difficult, right? You need to build that trust and that brand name, and you need people to vouch for you. And that's really difficult. And that's, to at least some extent, that's what we were doing here. So not underestimating that side of it is certainly a huge part of it. However, one of the things that I think that has come out of that is that we were truly experts in our domain for the technology side and the architecture and how things scale, right? And for an industry that's a little lagging in a lot of those ways, you want to bring outside perspective. Outside perspective is not bad. You just need to make sure that's in front of the right people in the right way. And that's been an uphill battle, but one that we see the top. So it's something that we have no problem doing. But having that domain expertise is sometimes a little diminished and being like, oh, you didn't grow up all the way in the restaurant industry. It's no, but I know how this works and I know where other industries are going and I know how this can help you. And I'm not just looking around in an echo chamber. And that's, I don't mean that as a negative thing, but it can be an echo chamber if you don't bring in outside opinions, push yourself as operators. So for someone that's on this side of it, it's a lot, especially, I mean, there's no surprise here. There's a lot of personality and personal relationships that go into this industry. But there's also a lot of people who are really interested in the next thing and just understanding things and understanding how it all fits together. For as much as COVID destroyed this industry and was really, really hard for a lot of reasons, right? One thing that came out of it was that this industry really hit a technology boom in a way, and that people are forced to be paying more attention to technology and finding different ways of getting to their customers and things like that. And being more conversational about technology has really helped unlock other things that have nothing to do with third-party ordering apps or things that were a direct result of COVID. I have a very positive outlook of where this industry is going, but it's not necessarily the most easy one to get into. I will say that.
Yeah, you got to have a lot of grit. And I appreciate that you're bringing a well-rounded perspective to such an amazing industry. And you're within that new guard who's helping folks understand ways to be innovative. Again, we're not trying to make anything less delicious or harder for anyone. It's all about the opposite of that.
Yeah, if anything, you're making it easier for the people who wanted to make food to actually make the food.
So simply said, that's perfect. So speaking of food, it's time, Jake.
Okay.
This podcast is called The Perfect Bite, a little bit of a perfect bite of my career to date, from journalist to startup founder to someone who works within food and bev with those folks. But it's also because each of us has our own perfect bite. We each have unique tastes, memories, and just that thing that you had a bite of, a moment, a meal that you'll never forget. So, Jake, what is your perfect bite?
I think the perfect bite is not a place or a specific item, right? It's a category. And I'm sorry to be really lame about this, but it's pizza. Like, it's pizza. And I'll qualify this. It's pizza because the thing you got last time doesn't have to be the thing you get the next time, or it could be if you want it to be. I mean, there are certainly toppings that are better than others. And I have since learned that more is not better with pizza, right? Just putting more on it makes for a soggy pizza, right? But if you can kind of fold it as a New York slice kind of thing, and you got the right toppings on it, and it's quality red sauce, in my opinion. I'm not going to do anything that's a white pizza. Not a fan. But being able to do that, right? I mean, zoom out from that perfect bite for a second. And what are the odds that you're eating that slice alone? You're in a conversation, you're sharing a pizza, right? How many times do you get a pizza for one? Pizza's about sharing and conversation in a meal and things like that. And it's also about compromise. What toppings are you getting, right? But I think the perfect bite it's everything that is and is around that perfect slice. I feel genuine in that, but at the end of it, I feel like that's a little corny.
The cornier, the better here. I usually like it when people make me cry. So I thought that was very sweet. Thank you. You never have to worry about being too corny here. Again, I am Midwestern,
cool.
So.
Fair enough.
Well, Jake, this has been so wonderful. Thank you again for sharing with everyone all of the innovations and the love and care that you're bringing to the hospitality industry through something totally new at ConnectedFresh. So tell us, where can listeners find you in terms of social accounts, the website, and anywhere else?
Yeah, LinkedIn, ConnectedFresh. We put out some blog posts and thought leadership pieces and things like that. And then just connectedfresh.com. I would invite anyone, if they're curious about it or they just want to learn more, or they have something and they're not loving it or whatever it is, just book a demo and see what it's actually like and spend the session talking about what you want to talk about. It's always such a great conversation. So I just invite anyone to spend some time with us or see us at the show.
Well, thanks again, Jake. This was so much fun. And everyone, this was Jake Simon's Perfect Bite.
Thanks for tuning in to The Perfect Bite today. You can listen to future episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else you listen to podcasts. Thanks in advance for subscribing, rating, and reviewing. You can follow The Perfect Bite on social media @PerfectBitePod. Now go get something good to eat.